Get ready to engage your brain and enter the Mind's Eye Show. I'm your host, Brian Turnov, and this is Z Talk Radio. Our guest for this edition of the Mind's Eye is Jean-Louis de Biasi, writer, speaker, and Hermetic philosopher. He has been initiated into the highest degrees of several Western initiatic traditions, is a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, as well as a specialist on Masonic rituals and Esoteric Freemasonry. De Biasi is the author on several international books on topics such as Freemasonry, Divinities, and varying Western teachings. In just a few moments, we'll converse about his upcoming book release, Rediscover the Magick of the Gods and Goddesses, revealing the mysteries of theurgy. The philosophical roots of much of Wicca and Paganism, as well as Western ceremonial magic, come from ancient Egypt. Jean-Louis shares this history, evolution, and practices of the Western mystery tradition, the theurgic tradition. You'll find out how-to instructions for discovering the presence of the divine in the world and how to achieve higher levels of consciousness. Philosophy, ancient wisdom, mysticism, and more, coming up with Jean-Louis de Biasi shortly after this quick commercial break. We're back with writer, speaker, and Hermetic philosopher Jean-Louis de Biasi. It's a delight to have you on the Mind's Eye tonight.
And thank you to have me.
The pleasure is all mine. So, this is the first time that we're lucky enough to have you on the show, the Mind's Eye. Give the listeners a quick background check for those who may not be familiar with you.
I am, as you said, a philosopher because I taught philosophy in France during several years, and I have a master in philosophy. But in the same time, philosophy is for me a way of life, and this is necessary to live philosophy. And through philosophy, you can discover the ancient traditions from the Mediterranean world, such as theurgy, and I am speaking in this book about theurgy, the world tradition coming from Egypt to the modern times. And this is my focus in my studies in order to always connect these ancient Western traditions and our modern daily life, and in order to find the best way to use them and the best way to understand who we are and who we can become. So through my training, I was initiated in the Hermes and other initiatic orders, such as Freemasonry, Kabbalistic Order of the Rose Cross, and I am the Grand Master of the Hermes since 2003. And this book is about theurgy, about Western tradition, and mostly focused on the Hermes because this is the same tradition.
All right, excellent. So let's just jump right into it. Your newest book, it's called Rediscover the Magick of the Gods and Goddesses, revealing the mysteries of theurgy. And you pretty much just gave a pretty good synopsis of what people can expect from the book. What exactly is theurgy?
Theurgy is a way to connect with the divine with the use of rituals, and you can imagine that theurgy is composed of three parts. The first parts are rituals, ceremonies. That means sacred words, movements, ceremonies you can use in order to connect to the spiritual level. And so this is not just meditation. You have a second part, which is the philosophy. And by philosophy, I want to explain that this is a way to meditate, to contemplate, and in the same time to learn ancient philosophy, which is very modern, as you can imagine. And the last part is more religious, theurgy. And this religious part is a way to connect with the divinities itself, with the gods and the goddesses. This part could be related, for example, with the Bhakti Yoga. That means a way by contemplation to connect with these divinities. And the theurgy is the union of these three parts. So the book is explaining the story and the history of this tradition, but in the same time providing several easy practices and rituals you can use individually if you want, and maybe in group. This is possible.
Now, the point of connecting theurgy is to connect to divinity. Is that, would you say, like a means to, like, what would be the point of connecting to a divinity? To acquire something, to attain something, to establish a relationship? Or is that really, is it like the meditation is the means to the end, and the end is just connecting at all?
Divinities are a way to ascend to a higher level, a higher state of consciousness. So you can ascend like that by simply meditating, and like a Zen meditation, but you can choose in a path like theurgy to connect with visualization, vibrations, use of sacred words with specific divinities, Egyptian, Greeks, Celtic, and so on. And when you are connected with these divinities, you are attracted by these divinities, and by this attraction, you ascend on this path. So this is maybe an easy way to progress, and to progress in a well-structured path. So and for some people, rituals are important. So some people are more comfortable in meditation, but others prefer to use words, movements, rituals, and this is what we are doing with theurgy.
Talk about the genesis, before we get into really applying it to the individual, which I know is a large part of the book. Let's talk a little bit about the history of theurgy. Talk about the genesis, where it came from, and then the evolution, where it went theurgy. Where did it come from originally?
This is a very, very difficult question, and this is very easy to answer. Why? Because as any religious tradition, you don't know really. Many people were talking about that, and theurgy, this word appeared in Greece, but in the same time, the tradition itself is coming from Egypt. So maybe the best way is to say that I connect this tradition with the god Jyoti, or Thoth in Egypt, Thoth, and it was a kind of revelation of Hermeticism, and several ancient Greeks, such as Pythagoras, Plato, went to Egypt to learn this tradition. And after a few centuries, we can see a kind of revelation. And this revelation gave to life a specific way to connect to these divinities, to the divine, with rituals. And at this time, with Iamblichus, we can talk really about theurgy. But he is talking about theurgy. This is, Iamblichus is between 245 and 325 before our era. After our era.
Little different.
And he began to explain the Platonic tradition, but always referring to the necessary use of rituals. And from him, we can talk about fusion between the Platonic tradition, Neoplatonic tradition, and theurgy. So these two aspects, which are composed of philosophy and rituals. And theurgy is this tradition. As you can imagine, any magic practices, any magical rituals were condemned by Christianity. And very early, around the 5th century, it was quite an obligation to be secret. And secret societies began to be the normal way to practice this lineage. So through all the Middle Ages and so on, all was secret. Until the Renaissance in Italy, and after that, you can see the theurgy coming back until today.
You said that theurgy is that rooted in Hermeticism? You said that before, or is it only a partial part of Hermeticism?
No, you can say that a theurgist is an Hermetist and a Neoplatonist. But you can be an Hermetist without being a theurgist. Okay. That means an Hermetist will learn the different books connected with this tradition, the Corpus Hermeticum and so on. And anyone can read these books, try to understand them, but you have no real inner experience. You have just intellectual, mental experience of this revelation, which is called a Neoplatonic tradition or Hermetic tradition. And if you want to experiment, so feel from the inside this tradition, you have to become a theurgist. And in this case, you will have some keys, some practical keys to use, some rituals, and you will activate, in fact, this world. So you can be theurgist, and you have to be Hermetist, but you can be Hermetist without being theurgist.
Okay, good. That's an excellent way of putting a distinction between the two. So theurgists are rooted in Hermeticism, like you said. So who was Hermes? From what I was doing, brushing up, he's been described as maybe a savant. What do you talk about Hermes for a little bit, and then how his philosophy stretched out beyond him?
Yes, what I can first explain is that in several books we are talking about Hermes and about thought and saying that this is just the same thing, just the same God, a new aspect in Greece of the Ibis thought. In fact, in theurgy, you understand very fast that if gods can be related, because they have quite common goals or common characters, but in the same time they are different. They can be relatives, for example, in the same family, but an Egyptian god like Jeuti or Thoth was a god of magic with Isis, with revelation, the understanding of the sacred books, and Hermes was a god which was transmitting the communication of other gods. So it was a kind of communicator, if you may, and they are a little different, in fact. But we can call this tradition Hermeticism because all that is Hermetic. That means you have to unveil something in order to find a truth. So this God, in fact, made a kind of revelation and provide books which are pretty much philosophical, religious interpretation of the cosmos and of our destiny. And you can understand the essence of these gods through the text and this revelation. I am talking about revelation because these books were revealed to someone called Julian, and they were revealed by the gold itself. And this is a religious pattern, of course, always the same thing. This is a myth, but in the same time, you have a very interesting text, and you have a lot to learn inside these texts.
The texts that were found, I could be mistaken on this, of course. I believe they found Hermetic texts in 1945, which was written in, I guess, the last Egyptian language. And I guess there's a tribute about 42 books to Hermes, but apparently there's only a few that people really know of. For someone who, I guess you're part of the Aurum Salus, do you guys have knowledge of all the books, or only the books that we know physically exist? Or if you could even tell me that at all, how about that? We can say next question.
We can always talk about everything. No. We are very, very focused on what you can see, learn, and not about what you can imagine or create. So nothing is secret regarding the books you can access. So the books you can find and read are the Corpus Hermeticum, the Chaldean Oracles, and other books that were found in Egypt. And that's it. But what we can do and what we are doing in the Aurum Solis is to use different rituals we received, such as oracle rituals, for example, to connect to different divinities, Thoth, for example, or the Greek divinities, such as Apollo, and to ask for inspiration to understand the books and understand few parts that are missing. Because you have the books, but in the Chaldean oracles, for example, many parts are missing. The books were destroyed and so on, and we found several parts, but not the whole book. So what we are doing is to use rituals to find these missing parts. And the way we are working as the Aurum Solis is present in different countries all around the world, in Africa, in America, and so on, we are performing rituals like that, sometimes in the same time everywhere, to connect with this divine and to receive, in fact, like inspiration, if you want, the missing parts. And after that, we compare the results and we select an interesting result. This is a very good way and very traditional way to work. So we do not have secret books that are missing, but we are doing our best with rituals and the help of every companions of the order to find the missing parts. And we will publish one time these parts in order to present another way to complete these books.
So your book is called Rediscover the Magick of the Gods and Goddesses, revealing the mysteries of theurgy, which we just went a little bit into its history and some of it. Why reveal it now, or at all, these mysteries?
As you know, today we have several in our society, several challenges. Many challenges are related to religion. Religions are fighting everywhere in the world, and most of the time this is monotheistic religions which are fightings, and there is a need to understand that you can talk about religion, propose rituals without any restrictions, and Hermeticism and theurgy are a specific way to see religion. In this case, because this is a kind of polytheism, religion is an open door, an open gate. It is not necessary to impose your own view on anyone. There is not one truth. There is several paths because there are several divinities, and everyone can choose what is right for him, try to find the best expression of the divine for him, change if this is necessary. And this opportunity of choice, this opportunity to experience, not just based on faith, but on experience, is a very modern approach, because this is a tolerant approach. So what you have to show is that in the Western tradition, we had this understanding. And we did that during centuries. After that, different religions imposed their own view, and many things changed. But at the time of Alexandria in Egypt, for example, it was the case. It was a time when the Bible was translated in Latin, and it was the time in which all religions were present in the same city, in the same time. It was possible to go in a temple, in a Greek temple, and an Egyptian temple, and all was open. And after that, all was closed, and several things were lost. So, highlighting this tradition, theurgy and Hermeticism, this is in our time to show that there is a path in which you can be tolerant, you can find your own way, you can share many things with the others without exclusion, very open, and you cannot do that if you have just one truth. And the beauty of theurgy is always to experiment, because you have not to agree to everything. This is not, faith is present, of course. I'm talking about reincarnation in the book and many things like that. But theurgy gives you keys in order to experiment everything and to keep your critical mind at any time. And this is, as you can imagine, something we need today in our society.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I couldn't agree more there. And talking about the principles of theurgy, to me it sounds like Jesus, even though I'm not a Catholic, Jesus Christ would almost be Hermetic or even theurgist, because essentially his is from what it seems like from my perspective, he was saying that we all can tap into the divine and we can all achieve higher consciousness, and we don't need to go through multiple lives or whatever. We can all experience it and experiment to get to that point. So it almost, Jesus to me almost sounds theurgist in his views.
Yeah, maybe the one of the difference could be the critical mind, because in this path we are philosopher, and being philosopher, you learn how to think, you learn how to analyze your thoughts, and you learn how to challenge yourself, because this is very easy to be wrong. This is very easy to fantasize, and we have to train our spirit to, and this is always an opposition, a challenge to maintain at the same time faith and critical mind. And this is a way of theurgy, to be like that, in the same time on these edges.
Yeah, I think we could all use a little bit of that style, critical thinking these days, particularly when there doesn't seem to be too much of it, particularly in
exactly, yes. This is why this tradition is very modern.
Contemporary.
Nothing has been changed, yes.
Now, let's get into some of the rituals, because by now I'm sure people are saying, all right, enough already, shut up, I want to know how to do this. But when people hear the word magic, they tend to have a preconceived notion of magicians, witches, and the prominence that you give to the idea, is that magic used to be a way of influencing or controlling nature. And scientists used to look upon magic in a respectful way. Essentially, I equate magic to science. Yeah. When and why did this change? Because theurgy seems like it would relate to a scientist as opposed to the opposite.
Exactly, yes. Yes. To explain this difference between magic and theurgy, it could be quite simple. Imagine that we have, everyone, inner powers. And these inner powers are not used, not often. Sometimes, but you have to master these inner powers and these inner abilities. So you can do that simply by meditation, visualization, vibration of a few vowels, words, and so on. And in this case, you are just using your inner abilities and powers. In this case, this is called magic, because you have something to do, you use your power. If you have to go somewhere, you walk. If you have to ask for something, you call someone. If you want maybe more money, you visualize. This is called magic. But these powers can also be used for spiritual purposes. And in this case, you will use these powers to ascend to the divine, as I said previously. And in this case, this is called theurgy. So as you can see, you can do both magic, but in this case, there is no ethics, no morality. You do what you want. You need something, you do something. And you perform a ritual because you know how to do that, and that's it. But there is no need in this case to talk about spirituality, gods, goddesses, and so on. But if you want to go further and to work on your inner self, on your soul, in order to think to your destiny and the afterlife, in this case, you need to do something different, and you will discover theurgy. So as you can see, you can be a magician without being the theurgist, but if you are a theurgist, you are using the tools and the keys of a magician.
Why did scientists move away from, respecting theurgy as essentially as science? When and why did that happen?
Some experiments related to the inner self is very difficult to analyze with science. And when we are working on the theurgic level or magic level, we are very close to religion. We are not very close to science. So, yes, this is difficult to think about these subjects like theurgy and magic in the scientific point of view. And maybe science today has something more urgent to do. To solve disease, to solve energy and everything. So maybe after they will come back to talk about theurgy. But today there are more important things for our life in the world. So what we need as theurgists is to think about religion or to think about faith and inner experience as a scientist. But the scientist don't need us. But theurgists, yes, need this scientific approach. So we need science. Science don't need us now, I guess. Of course, they can learn things from us. Because the founders in Alexandria, Egypt, quite all were scientists. Because at this time it was quite possible to manage in the same time both. Today, time is running fast.
I just think that's a true shame because, you know, magic and science, they used to be integrated, and now, like you said, they're really separated, and they're two distinct institutions. But it shouldn't really be that black and white because there is a lot of overlap between science and religion, whether either side wants to really admit it, in my opinion.
Yes, and when you have conflict, this is between science and religion. There is no conflict between science and theurgy, because theurgy knows very well that this is not possible to demonstrate in the facts what we are doing. You can experiment it yourself with the keys I can provide in the book or in workshops and so on. You can experiment. But you cannot prove with physical and material proofs. And this is why there is no conflict. We know that. And there is no need to try to convince a scientist, because this is not possible. If we are talking about the soul, we cannot say to him or her, try it. No, there is nothing to do. But if he wants to experiment, he can do that.
All right, good. And we're definitely, that's going to be coming up shortly. For those just tuning in, this is The Mind's Eye with guest Jean-Louis de Biasi about his newest, Rediscover the Magick of the Gods and Goddesses, Revealing the Mysteries of Theurgy. And I spoke with anthropologist Magin Gonzalez, whose perspective on gods and goddesses from ancient religions is that really they represent different forms of energy, and you pray to the gods and goddesses to manipulate this energy, this natural energy, I guess for your own use or for the use of good or bad, whatever you're doing it for. Is that, it sounds similar to theurgy. Is that, would you agree with that, or is it kind of separate from manipulating energy, the praying to the gods and goddesses?
No, I don't agree. No, because imagine someone talking about Christianity or Judaism and saying the God in which you believe is just energy, and there is nothing, just energy. Yes, maybe, but who knows? Who can prove something? So what we can say is that we have several representations of gods and goddesses, and what I am sure is that it is quite impossible to know if they are real gods or goddesses or just a concentration of energy. And even in the past, you can read a few texts from ancient Greeks, philosophers, who were thinking about that, and they were not sure about that. But when you want to connect with this kind of archetype, if you have a beautiful and precise symbolic representation, the connection is faster and easier. And thinking about just energy is less efficient. So if we have to choose, I will go to the more efficient.
I think that's probably the right choice there. I would agree.
And after that, if there is a god or goddess, and if she appears in front of me, she will tell me if she's an energy, just energy, or someone else. But I need a real contact for that.
And just to clarify, although you're praying to gods and goddesses within theurgy, it's a monotheistic perspective on God, right?
Monotheistic, you said?
Yeah, like even though you're praying to gods and goddesses, they all come from one all-being. Is that correct?
No.
No? Oh, okay.
No.
I thought I was reading that somewhere. So there
No, this is really,
all-being.
really polytheistic.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Because I guess I must have been reading something out there.
No, you know what? Because in fact, you can talk about two different things, and I will try to explain in a few simple words. There is tradition. I was initiated. I am a Freemason. And in Freemasonry, they are talking about a kind of cosmic spirit called the Grand Architect of the Universe. And this kind of Grand Architect of the Universe, you can say that this is a unique God. In fact, this is a kind of cosmic organization, but not with a specific representation. And inside this world, you have archetypes or gods and goddesses. And these archetypes are different than this great architect, this cosmic principle. So we can say, yes, there is a unique cosmic principle and several gods and goddesses. This is not exclusive, but we have both. And when we are trying to use theurgy to ascend like that on the spiritual level, we are trying to connect with these divinities, but with a relation founded on attraction, maybe love, and not invocation. This is not a command, this is a kind of loving attraction. And with this relation, you can have a real contact.
All right, well, that definitely clarifies what I was thinking there. So I was completely wrong. Nothing wrong with that.
No!
So, excuse me. The book gives how-to instructions for discovering the presence of the divine in the world. And we kind of referenced it a little bit earlier. I want to talk a little bit more about it right now. Give a bit of an overview about this how-to instructions on discovering this presence.
You are talking about something else when you say the presence of the divine in the world, because this is called animism sometimes. That means the sacred is present in the world, in nature. And when we are talking about gods and goddesses, we are talking about archetypes, as I said, but they are separate from the world. So not exactly they are part, but they are not part, because this is a special level, as you said, a special level of energy, of something like that. But how to find this divine in the world? You have to look inside you, of course, but you have to use different keys, as I said, meditation, visualization, rituals, to feel this level of divinity. You are trying to connect with invisible levels, and this is very simple. You are using precise visualization, precise symbols, precise sounds, and with these keys you open gates, and these gates connect you with these divine levels, this divine presence all around you, and even inside you. And what you need is a structure path, because we talked about the difference between magic and theurgy. And one of the difference, very important difference, is a structure path, a kind of progressive ascent. And in the rituals I provide or practices, I always provide something progressive, something you can use, and more you will use it, more and more the contact will be intense. So this structure path is important.
Yeah, you're providing something tangible, something applicable for the individual, and I think that's where some of the disconnect can come from between some between theurgists or similar, I guess, perspectives and other and people. But before you said that you provide almost exercises, you provide rituals to help the reader get this higher consciousness.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you mind just giving maybe an example, or
yes.
Maybe extrapolate a little bit on that idea?
Well, at the end of the book, maybe in the last chapter, I provide 7 rituals connected to the 7 days of the week. And this is a very interesting process if you want to experiment this contact. Of course, this is not the first practice. The first practice is more simple. But in this case, you have just a simple rituals to read the description, to perform this ritual. And you can use one per day. For example, the Monday, you will use the ritual for the moon, for Selene. Tuesday, you will use the ritual for Mars, and so on for the other days. And a good try is to perform these rituals during 1 week, and very fast you will feel something very deep. You will feel a kind of echo inside you. You will feel a special presence. So you need time, of course, but even immediately you will feel something. And this connection is not the revelation of a God inside, in front of you, but a real connection. And you will understand how it works if you are using these rituals. So these archetypes of the 7 days of the weeks are very ancient. And when you are using these visualizations, you are connecting yourself with very old traditions, and this is like a living memory. And you will find this very, very attractive and convincing, I am sure. This is an example you can find in the last chapter.
Excellent. And obviously you've had experiences using these rituals of magic, quote unquote. So you can attest that these are real. When was the first time you realized that these ancient traditions and these ancient rituals, they just weren't words to say? There was something legitimate behind it. When did you first realize that this is for real? Connecting to the divine through these.
Yes. I was very, very interested by all the Western tradition, Eastern tradition first and Western tradition after in the 80s. And I experimented several things connected with Kabbalah, and progressively when I became a teacher in philosophy, I was even more interested by the Western tradition. Then I was initiating in the Rome Solis. And this specific approach was interesting because you have always to experiment. So when I began to change and to switch from magic to theurgy, I understand that a true relation is, as I said, an attraction. And after that, with this kind of inner relation, you feel things. You feel things before they happen. You feel what is right, correct. This is not a kind of manifestation always, but an inner connection through rituals. Yes, it was very early, and this is for me something important to always to explain that when you are in this path, you are not in the path of power. Because if you are talking about a spiritual level or divinities, you are not in in a fight against powers. You are in another approach. You are in a contact with them. So this is something really different. And in the book, I am trying to talk about that when I explain that in theurgy, you can find epicurism, you can find pleasure, and all these aspects are part of the contact. For example, in Plato is talking about beauty. And Plato is explaining that when you love beauty, you ascend to the divine. And beauty, you can find beauty all around you in the world. So to be able to feel this beauty, and this is not something magic at the beginning, but you will progressively progress and maybe have some kind of ecstasis after. Just because you open your mind to the beauty of the world, to the pleasure, and this is a way to go in the theurgic path too. And this is something we have to explain. We are not in a path, in a monastery, closed between doors. We have to be outside, enjoying the world and the life. And this is something very well connected to theurgy.
Quite frankly, that sounds lovely. It's making that true connection. And it's interesting. Personally, I somehow keep circling back to theurgy, Neoplatonism, and Hermeticism within the past 6 months. For example, recently, I'm sure you're going to be familiar with him, I interviewed Bruce McLennan on Neoplatonism.
Yes, we are in relation.
Yes, I think he might have done an opening for the book for you, I believe.
Yes, exactly.
And so, he's talking about the teachings of Hypatia, which definitely deal with what we're talking about. And also, I was randomly going through my bookshelf the other day and rediscovered a book that, for whatever reason, passed by me after I bought it. It's called The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah. Yes.
And I'm just...
An American, Canadian-American.
Best of both worlds. That's what I like to say. What does theurgy and Hermeticism and Neoplatonism talk about synchronicity? Because it just seems to keep popping up in my life, and is it giving me signs? I don't know. Is this synchronicity? What does it say about it?
Synchronicity is a very beautiful word to talk about divinity of the fates. Yes, the more in Greece were divinities preparing your life and trying to connect you, to put you at the right time, at the right place. This is really interesting. I am convinced that this tradition is maybe the best Western tradition if you think about tolerance and about accepting the world around you. Because you have to work on yourself, of course, as Bruce McLennan was explaining in his book with philosophy. And philosophy could be a way to progress to the divine, but when you connect philosophy, and he's doing that too, when you connect this philosophy with rituals, you have something really powerful. And the best is to understand this spirit. Because as I said previously, we are not fighting against something or against someone. We are not in a Kabbalistic relationship between two antagonist powers. We are just in the center of the world, enjoying the world, and trying to enjoy even more. And to do that, we have just to open our mind, our soul, and to try to understand and experiment the mysteries of the life, and understand in the same time that a true initiatic tradition, a true lineage, can help you, because several masters, several initiates worked before us, and they organized things, they organized practices, rituals in a coherent way. So we can go faster like that, and maybe we don't lost our time. It could be faster. You need time, of course. You need repetition. You need practices. When you are learning to do something, when you are learning to drive, you need lessons. When you are trying to visualize, you need lessons and you need time. Some people are okay immediately, others needs more time. But the principles are very simple, in fact. This is not as complicated as Kabbalah. You have very few things to understand, and immediately you understand the system, you understand the world.
And obviously everything we learn by doing, so that makes sense.
Yes, and all is connected. For example, if I am talking with you about the cosmic representation of the theurgic view of the cosmos, this is simple. You know how many elements we have? 4 plus 1 the ether. We have planets, we have the zodiac, and that's it. You know everything in a few seconds. After that, you have to understand how it works and how you can use that. But the principles, 4 elements, 7 planets, 12 signs, you know quite everything. So this is simple. You don't have to, yes, as you said, you have to experiment, but to understand the principles of everything, as I explain in the book, this is quite simple.
Well, I'm sure to you it's simple, but maybe to someone like me, it may not be that quite simple. What
you know that there are 7 planets.
No, I know.
So,
what about the 5 temples of the human being? How does that relate? How does that relate here?
In fact, I am using a Greek word called the temenos, because the temenos in Greece was the word to explain what is a temple. And when you are in front of a Greek temple or Roman temple, you have the triangle at the top, which is the number 3, and you have after that the 2 columns on the left and right, and the number 2. So you have, in fact, 5 parts. And the human beings can be associated to this archetypal structure. And in theurgy, we say that we have 5 parts. You can find more, but the most important are these 5 parts of the human being. So you have the body, for example, which is called the soma. You have the bodies of light, which are the aura and all the you can try to see around you. You have the soul itself, called sometimes psyche, the spirit, and the divine. And all these parts are what I call the occult structure of the human being. And there is a way to use every part in your experiences. And I provide an exercise, a theurgic calyx, to understand what it is. You have to make a few visualization and invocation, and you can feel inside you these different parts. So the words can be sometimes different. We are not talking always about aura. I prefer the bodies of light, but it is the same thing. And this is what I call the 5 parts, in fact.
That is just utterly fascinating. And you said before that you were introduced very early into the Aurum Solis. Do you mind just filling me in and the listeners in and how that organization developed from theurgy as theurgist?
Yes, in fact, Aurum Solis, for me, and as you will be able to discover in the book, this is theurgy. This is the manifestation today of theurgy. And we are using the 3 pillars I was talking about, philosophy, theology, and theurgy, in the same way. So the Aurum Solis was revealed in 1897 in England, but it was, in fact, the modern aspect of this secret and sacred tradition, which was coming from the Renaissance in Italy and from Greece and from Egypt. And of course, as any tradition, there is an heritage, and what we are doing is to use these rituals, this structure, to make real what I am talking about. Because many things can be in a book, but a book is not enough to train you. You as an individual, everyone is different. So you need someone like a supervisor helping you step by step. So everything, yes, can be in the book, but to help you progressively in this discovery, you need someone and you need a school. And this is this kind of school. So to understand what it is, you open the book, and this is very easy. This is this tradition and the spirit of this tradition. So we are using from time to time other aspects, like Kabbalah from time to time, but it was not the root of the tradition. It was something used and part of the Western tradition.
So how do I join? Quite frankly, it sounds. I'm a Freemason like yourself. Actually,
yes.
I was raised in Maryland a few years back, but tell me where to sign up. That's what I want to know.
Yes, we have a website. You go on the website. You have becoming a member. You click, and that's it. Oh. This is very simple. Oh. But what you have to know is that in this order you have a test during 9 months. That means you begin by a time of pronounce. We will provide you several teachings, several philosophical teachings, and several eight rituals. You have to perform at precise time, and this is a moment in which you can experiment yourself, and in the same time we can see if you are sincere, if you have a real desire to progress. And if you say, okay, this is not for me, that's it. And if you say, yes, this is very exciting, I want to be initiated. At this moment, we will tell you yes or no. And you will be initiated. And at this time, you will begin in the first hall and so on. Because, as I said, it takes time, and the first step is to practice. If someone wants to come just to learn intellectually, this is not the place. You can do that without the answers. But if you want to experiment what is theurgy, what is Hermeticism, and experiment immediately with friends and brothers from everywhere, this is a place to go. And you asked me a moment ago how I realized that it was something real. In fact, I realized as practitioner, but when I became in charge of the order, the order began to expand very carefully in different countries. And when you see people experimenting exactly the same ritual in Africa, in South America, in Australia, in Norway, and having exactly the same result, not in details because the results are connected with your own experience, but you can reach the same state of consciousness, you say, okay, there is something which is not related to someone in particular. There is something we can use everywhere, something universal. And you can see that just because the order is working in different culture. I was talking this morning with an African member, and he was explaining to me that in his family he has masks and divinities, statues, And he was explaining how his family was connecting and offering different things to the divinities. And it was exactly the same we are doing in the Orm Solis. And this connection talked to me, because you can see that they are connections very, very ancient and very powerful. And these are experiences that help you to understand that something is working and something is real.
And I think having that standard is excellent. And as a Freemason, I'm sure maybe you can relate on this opinion. I guess that's one of my issues, I guess I've always particularly had with Freemasonry, is that it is not standard, and the fact that it is decentralized, it makes it almost impossible to go, not impossible, but you can't go from lodge to lodge and expect almost the same exact thing, or, there's a lot of variations here. And
yes, Freemasonry,
that's why it sounds so appealing, is that there is that standard and centralization for Orm Solis.
Yes, exactly, and this lineage is very important. This continuity, the fact that there is no fight, there is nothing divided, and you can feel that immediately when you connect. Because when you asked what will happen if I become a member, I said you have a first step called pronounce, but in the same time, this is a theurgic and magical order. That means we will send you a consecrate tool, and you will use this consecrate tool during your rituals to be connected with the egregore and with the egregore of the order. And immediately you will have a real physical connection and with this lineage. And this is very important. In fact, you know that I wrote a book about Freemasonry, and I am working on another one. And I was initiated in Europe a long time ago, and I am part of the American Masonry now. But in Freemasonry, we are working most of the time with symbols, but without activation of these symbols. We are just using as reminder or lessons, but they are not activated. They are quite sleeping. You can, and I provided several rituals, individual rituals for Freemasons in my first book. You can activate these Masonic symbols, but you have to learn how to do that, and you have to do your part individually. But this is not taught today, because maybe there is no need, or nobody is asking. But I will think about that, and I am working on an esoteric Freemasonry club to do that.
Excellent. That sounds wonderful, and I'm glad we could, that we have a similar perspective on that. Now, sadly, the clock is ticking, and we only really have a few minutes left before we got to end the show. So, tell the listeners where they can get your new book, Rediscover the Magick of the Gods and Goddesses, revealing the mysteries of theurgy, and while you're doing that, also share your social media websites so they can reach out to you.
Yes, you can first go to the website of the publisher, llewellyn.com, and you can find the book on Amazon.com, and you can go on my website, debiasi.com, debiasi.org, and on Facebook you use my name and you will find very fast for Orm Solis, because we talked about a lot about Orm Solis. This is AURUMSOLIS.info, and you will find everything, and you can send an email, you can contact me by Facebook, and I will try to answer you, maybe not immediately, but I will do that.
Wonderful. Jean-Louis de Biasi, greatly appreciate giving the Mind's Eye a piece of your time. It truly was a pleasure, and you're a wealth of information, so I really appreciate imparting that wisdom on us.
Thank you for having me.
We have a great Mind's Eye show next week with guest Graham Nichols, author, artist, and OBE expert, on his latest Navigating the Out-of-Body Experience, Radical New Techniques. Don't forget to check out Jean-Louis de Biasi's site at debiasi.org, DEBIASI.org. Also check out orumsolis.info, solis.info. And while you're visiting, come check out our website, themindseyemedia.com. themindseyemedia.com. Stay tuned for Haunted Harvest Moon in the next hour. I'm your host, Brian Turnov, and as always, I truly thank you for your ear. This has been the Mind's Eye Show on Z Talk Radio.